Sir, in regard to the examination of the water powers of your colony, having in view electric transmission of energy, I beg to make the following preliminary report. We examined the Waikato watershed, visiting the lakes Taupo and Roto'ara. In this region, which is quite unusual in many ways, immense quantities of power can be developed, and although somewhat distant from the centers of industry, it will someday prove of wonderful value to the colony. The vision of immense quantities of water power, which would someday prove of wonderful value to the colony, was to become a reality 70 years after the prediction was made in 1903. The year 1954 saw the New Zealand government engage engineering consultants, Sir Alexander Gibb and Partners of London, to investigate the possibility of producing more power from the Waikato River drainage system. Work soon began on a series of dams and power stations on the upper Waikato River. At the same time, investigations began on what was to become known as the Tongariro Power Development. The goal of this development was to capture water coming off the mountains of the Central Plateau. This was to be done by a complex system of river and stream diversions, tunnels and canals, lakes and power stations, and a catchment of more than 1,000 square miles. As a technical proposition, the Tongariro Power Project was to be the finishing touch, the completion of harnessing the Waikato drainage system for hydroelectric purposes. Construction on the Tongariro Power Project began on September 4, 1964. Once the project construction phase began, Turangi was inundated with a large workforce. At its peak, the Tongariro Power Development employed over 2,100 men. A lot of these men had come up the Waikato, working on the many power projects started after World War II. They would become known as Ngāti Hydro. The arrival of a large group of Italian tunnelers added an international flair to the community. Tunneling was to be a challenging aspect of the project and often fraught with danger. For 20 years, this workforce labored to bring one of the biggest civil engineering projects in New Zealand's history to completion. The Tongariro Power Development has been producing electricity for more than 35 years. For most, the construction phase is largely forgotten. However, what I hope that isn't forgotten is the memory of the men and their pride of association with the project. After all, it was these men who built this engineering legacy. I'm going to tell you the story of one such man, a Scottish immigrant, and the only person who worked from the beginning to the end on the Tongariro Power Development.
Yes, Mr. Director, sir. Lead on. This is called the Wanganui Pipe Bridge. And it's about, from memory, it's 3.5 meters in diameter, and it's about 100 meters long.
Kerry Scott, a civil engineer originally from Elgin, Scotland, arrived in Turangi in 1957. His employer at the time was the London-based consulting company, Sir Alexander Gibb and Partners. Kerry was being assigned to the investigation team, assessing the viability of the Tongariro Power Development. For the next 5 years, Kerry surveyed nearly 1,000 square miles of the Central Plateau watershed, assessing water flow and determining the critical levels. As a result of these investigations, Gibb and Partners submitted their report to the government with the recommendation that the development proceed.
Quite a structure, isn't it? Eh? Actually getting it into place was a bit of a challenge.
When the New Zealand government gave the power project its final approval, Kerry knew he wanted to be part of it. The complexity and size of the civil engineering works was exactly what he was looking for. The project for Kerry was to become a life's achievement. He progressed up the management ladder to the overall Project Construction Engineer. He was a field man at heart. He took a great deal of interest in all the construction projects. He gave me a tour of some of these structures. I could tell he knew them like the back of his hand. I could see professional pride in his work, but no professional arrogance.
The Te Whaiau Canal, hence into Lake Otamanakau, and down the Wairohu Canal and into Rotaira.
The construction days must have been quite something.
Oh well, it was all happening here. There was 10,000 people living in Turangi. There were 3 primary schools, a high school, a new maternity hospital, and there was something like 84 clubs in the town. And there was a very good community spirit. Hang on, are you doing something? I've got something to tell you.
The retired engineer was giving me an earful on the Whanganui Pipe Bridge, but I was dying to hear his story of how his life in Turangi began.
That's the crew in Project Office, or Bullshit Castle as it was known as. And there I am, with a toy of hell.
Kerry took me back in time to a cold winter's day in London in 1957. His employer, Sir Alexander Gibb and Partners, the internationally renowned consulting engineering firm, was about to make a decision that would send Kerry to the other side of the world.
January '57, I got called up to the director's room, which was rather unusual, I thought. It sounded as though I was going to get the boot. And the chief director happened to be a Scotsman. And he said, "Oh, Scott, how would you like to go to New Zealand?" And I said, "Oh yeah, that sounds all right." Sort of business. So that was that. And in February I was on a DC-6B en route to New Zealand.
Kerry took up residence at the Sir Alexander Gibb camp on the edge of scrub, which would eventually be developed into the town of Turangi.
And we arrived at the camp, which was there was a row of dog boxes, 10 by 8 huts, and a lounge come kitchen all in one build. Not long afterwards, I was in bed one night, and I could feel the hut rocking a bit, and it was a horse. It was rubbing itself on the side of the hut. So I got out and said, "Grr!" and it bolted away, and it rushed over a sheet of corrugated iron, so there was this clunk, clunk, clunk. So that was my introduction,
That was your introduction to New Zealand.
to Turangi, yeah.
Sir Alexander Gibb had sent Kerry to Turangi as an investigations engineer. The proposed power scheme was very complex and needed considerable exploration to ensure its viability. For the most part, in the beginning, it was a case of just getting out to know the countryside, because the scheme covered 1,000 square miles. One of Kerry's early responsibilities included core drilling, to find out what was down below the surface to ensure proper support for the proposed structures. He was also involved with gauging the rivers to see how much water was there, water being the necessary key for hydropower.
We needed to find out how much fuel there was there. In other words, how much water. So one of the jobs I did in the early days was measure the river. We particularly had to try and get flood flows. So flood flows were a bit of a problem because it's not everywhere that you can get. I know there's a photograph somewhere. Just wait.
That's right. Yep, keep going. That's good.
Here we go. There's the type of instruments, you see, that we used. Now this was a cableway we put up in 1959, because in February '58, the big flood took out all our gauging stations. You know, it was completely changed.
So you're measuring liver flows.
That's right.
Was the results optimistic for the project?
Yes, it confirmed what the Ministry of Works had guesstimated, I guess. Yeah. All the engineers and surveyors on the crew come from overseas. Some had come from Britain, some had come from Africa. Mainly the surveyors had come from Africa. Chainmen we recruited locally, so they were all local people, and you get to know them pretty well. Now, we've got a photograph here of that was some of the crew. It wasn't them all. These were all chainmen. And of course what they do is they cut the survey lines because there was a lot of tea tree and scrub and all sorts of things that you had to fight your way through. The surveyors needed clear line of sight, so they would cut the lines, and then they would hold up the staffs, the survey staff, so that the surveyors could do the thing. This was their bus, and in the back they had this couch which they sat on. And if you weren't the first three into the bus, then you didn't get a seat.
Much of Kerry's early years were spent out in the field with his chainman crew. Time has taken its toll on the original crew. Only Stuart Carroll and Eddie Kumaroa are still alive today. Getting together with Stuart was a great opportunity to talk about the time they shared in the field, exploring and surveying.
It's good to meet up with you again, Stuart. But how did you get into touring in the first place? Because you weren't here originally. How did you get onto our books and become a chainman?
Oh, Jim Rafferty. I think because I used to run into Jim Rafferty every now and again, and it started off actually we were talking about the rugby now.
There were the many forays together, beating their way through the scrub and bush, surveying roads and locations for the proposed power project.
I was still staying up on the farm with people. And then that's how I said, I'll see if I can get you a job. Well, it was about 2 days after.
Also part of their fond memories were the gatherings they had at the local pub, where stories were told and the odd colleague receiving a roasting.
This fella here at the end, Joe Cody, or Joe Kaki, he was the lead and all that.
All in all, I sense a huge amount of respect amongst these men, and a genuine pride for the work they achieved.
He'd fought his way through all the scrub, which was all the scrub where the shopping centre is and all that sort of stuff.
All scrub along here.
Yeah. Oh God, he was a god.
Yeah.
Kerry was initially contracted with Sir Alexander Gibb for a period of 1 year. However, developments moved quite quickly during 1957, and the government provided additional funding to the Gibb team to carry on their investigations. Gibb would make Kerry a unique offer which was to have a major impact on his life.
So the money was available, and they said to me, "Oh, well, we'd like you to stay on a bit longer. How about staying for 3 years?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I don't mind. And, I'm enjoying it here. It was good." And they said, "You don't have any." I can't remember how they put it, but I think it wasn't encumbrances, but it was something like that. And I said, "Well, there's a girl that I'm engaged to. She I suppose won't wait forever." I think she would actually. And they said, "Oh, okay. Well, we'll see what we can do." And they come back and said, "Right, we'll send her out. You can get married in New Zealand. What do you think of that?" And I said, "Yeah, fair enough. Okay."
Well, I thought that was very exciting. I mean, not everybody gets to fly all the way to New Zealand to get married, do they? I remember wondering how on earth we were going to find a church and a minister, but Kerry had worked all that out. The night before the wedding, I stayed at the Wairaki Hotel, which is not like what it is now, and I was awake all night because the steam bores roared all night. It was a tremendous noise, and I was up at about 5:30 in the morning because I couldn't cope any longer. Kerry invited various people, from Sir Alexander I suppose all the staff from Sir Alexander Giving Partner came, and all the drilling contractors. But really the only person I knew was Kerry, which I suppose was lucky. I knew him.
In 1962, GIB had finished their report and had duly handed it over to the Ministry of Works and the government. And so Margaret and I packed up our bags and went back to Britain.
We went home by ship. By this time we had 3 small children under the age of 5.
I went into the GIB headquarters in London, in Queen Anne's Lodge, and saw the partners and said, "Look, I'm back." And they said, "Oh yeah, right. Well, we haven't actually looked out a job for you yet, but it'll probably be in our London office." So you can imagine my face dropped quite dramatically. I mean, after being 5-6 years of New Zealand and in the bush, and out in a tussock, what do you expect?
And we had 3 little Kiwis who were used to bare feet and sort of, I think our parents were slightly scandalised because we were told off, either my mother or Kerry's, I can't remember which, that we'd been out and they had bare feet. And all the neighbours would think we were too poor to buy shoes.
Margaret and I decided that this wasn't us.
Where we really wanted to be was New Zealand.
Let's go back to New Zealand. The hell with this place. So we did.